It's a pleasure to be here. I was telling Mohan, it's a fantastic bunch of panelists that you've gathered, except for myself. I think you've done a fantastic job of getting the best possible people to speak at each panel, and it's a privilege to be amongst this group. It's internet and mobile, something that all of us are absolutely clued on and have no opportunity or hope in hell to escape, nor that we want to either. And what we're going to speak about is how does the future of internet and mobile stand for a country like India. There's a lot happening. There's so much that's happened, not just in the last 5-10 years that we've seen, but it's happening every day. New business models are coming in. New ways of engagement with the consumers are happening. And I think it's almost as if by design we have perhaps the best spread that's possible. We have the best companies that stand for their own verticals in every right. And we'll have a fairly engaging conversation. How we will do it is each one of us will have about 3 to 5 minutes to speak on their specific verticals / functions. And then I will take down the main points, and we'll have an open-ended conversation for about 15-20 minutes. And we would much rather than hear it from the audience to have a more open-ended conversation after that to conclude. All right. I'll just go back to the history of internet, and back then it was all about content advertising. It was all about classified verticals. You had jobs, you had matrimonial, you had dating, you had real estate, etc. And amongst all of that was where perhaps the poster boy of Indian internet, Naukri, emerged. And Sanjeev had this fantastic idea, and he went through that, and it's become to really stand for what Indian internet is all about. So Vivek, if you could help us give us an insight into how do you see this entire classifieds, content-led game in internet unfolding in the next 3 to 5 years. It's been facing a bit of challenge because no one's really sure of internet advertising as a business model, but when you look at players like yourself, there hasn't been any visible decline or any visible delay of opportunities coming through. So if you could just shed light from your own experiences and what you see of the future, classifieds in industry, not just limited to jobs, but overall real estate, matrimonial, education. How do you see that unfolding?
Hello, am I audible? Okay. I think as the presentation just before we started, and as you mentioned, I think internet has changed the all facets of life that we have seen, and clearly classified has been a major area where it has made significant impact. And then one thought which comes to my mind is because classified tends to be so focused on search and discovery of relevant content, which we can benefit greatly from the internet. And that's one reason why classifieds have taken off far more than any other category. Most of the information is digital, as we know, and the delivery is mostly digital. There's no physical goods being delivered, and that continues to be a major cost for businesses to overcome. If I look at, let's say, a jobs space, we are essentially matching job seekers' preferences with the requirement of the recruiter. Again, in the matrimony, it is the bride and groom trying to match their preferences, finding the best person, matching their fit. In property, it's the buyers and sellers trying to figure out what is the right property and what is the right price, or the landlord and the tenant trying to figure out the right match for themselves. And similarly in education, it is the student and the institute, their preferences and the requirements being matched when they're trying to get the right student to join the institute. And then clearly, matching of preferences is something which is very information heavy, which requires discovery of the right fit, and an internet as a medium is rightly placed to deliver value in that space. Now, if I look at the innovation which is happening, the 3 things which I see which are in motion already and which will impact going forward. One is obviously, as we have discussed, mobile as a medium of accessing internet, the anytime, anywhere access. It's bringing new audience in the internet space. It is making internet accessible at a lower cost to almost everyone who wants to access it. It's less than 100 rupees a month GPRS connection. It delivers value, not great in terms of speed or content, but it actually gets you email, it gets you content which you can access, and you can satisfy at least some of your basic information needs and search and discover content and relevant information for yourself. The second piece which I see is rich media, which is definitely playing out very well. And in the classified space, it is definitely impacting, even though if you look at, let's say, Metro Money, we know photograph has a huge value, right? And for example, I hear the data point which says if you have profile as a photograph, there's 7 times more chance of getting a response than a profile which does not have a photograph. If you look at property, we are seeing much richer content. We have photographs and videos of localities available on the web. We are seeing photographs of properties coming on the web. And clearly, it bridges the trust deficit which exists as a significant challenge for all businesses to overcome on the net. If you have more photographs, if you have more videos, it brings more relevant information for the audience to consume and make the right decision. Now, if I look at jobs, we made the initiative on photographs, and we have a few million photographs already on the site from job seekers' point of view. And we launched a product about 2 months back where recruiters can create a public profile on Naukri, and we have about 7,000 recruiters already. In the last 1.5 months, we have been live with the product. And we're hoping to cover all the recruiters we have in India to have a public profile, and preferably with a photograph of theirs. So it is job seekers connecting with the recruiters, searching for them, finding the right recruiter, and not just searching for jobs. So it's a product which is allows job seekers to also follow recruiters. It's more like if you have, TCS, there are 10 recruiters which you hire in this space, you can go and follow them, and you can actually follow maybe hundreds and thousands of recruiters, and you can get access to jobs in a way very different from what they've been doing so far. In education, again, campuses have photographs. This is already available, gives you an insight on what kind of facilities, gives you insight on what kind of guest lectures, what kind of environment which exists on the institute, as part of the institute, in addition to reviews and other stuff which helps the student decide what's the right institute to join. The third major trend which I see is big data and analytics, which is going to make the matching and preferences being captured at a far bigger level of detail. It will also allow a personalized matching, trying to find the right job seeker for recruiter and recruiter for the job seeker. As I look at this, classified is a lot about finding the right match for each of the parties. So these are the 3 trends, and this is how I see impacting the business.
Fantastic, great. Thank you so much, Vivek. And I 100% agree, and no one will dispute that. So mobile, rich media, and big data and analytics are the ones that would drive classifieds, and I'd argue perhaps for our verticals as well. Great, and then from the classifieds era, we came to our first commerce industry, which was initiated by travel, and Yatra is one of the finest examples of success in that domain. Is an extremely old player, has been very successful through the entire thing, and with Salman Khan coming in, it's gone to the next level altogether. Walk us through the future, Anurag, specifically of online travel. There is pressure on ticketing as a business model, but then there are different avenues opening up. The consumers are also opening up to hotels, packages, a lot more. So walk us through the future.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay?
John, can you increase the volume?
Hello? Is this working? Okay,
Yep.
great. First of all, I'd like to thank Great Lakes for hosting this conference and including me in this panel. It's great to be among this peer of panelists. And I think the theme is a very, very relevant one, especially in the case of travel. of identifying growth drivers in a stressed economy. I think we've all felt the pain of seeing airfares skyrocket significantly, over the past 18 months or so. And that, coupled with the slowdown in the economy, we've actually seen a decline of air traffic growth for 10 months up until March of this year. So that's happened after quite some time in the Indian economy. In an emerging market, you would expect that growth to continue. So what I thought I'd address is really two areas. One is, what has Yatra done to grow despite that turbulence, if you will? And second, what are some of the areas of innovation that we see in the space? So in terms of what we've done over the last, I would say, year, 2 years, is really focus on the basics, really just improving the user experience. It's not the sexiest of all things, but it's helped us kind of stabilize in this turbulent environment. And specifically, there are three things. One is we're focused on speed. Interestingly, our research shows that speed is one of the most important for users in generating results within milliseconds. So that's one area that we've really invested a lot in. And again, it's not a consumer-facing feature or bellow whistle per se, but it requires a fair amount of investment, and the benefits can be significant. So we have invested in that. We've seen promising results on domestic flights, and we're in the process of rolling it out for the rest of the site. The second area, not surprisingly, is mobile. And again, what we've done is really improve our website or HTML5 site. What we've done is just gone screen by screen, optimized each screen, removed redundant fields in such a small form factor. That's really critical. And again, the results have been very promising. Now, mobile bookings actually account for quite a reasonable share of our overall bookings. And we've also added hotels, the ability to book hotels through mobile as well recently. The third area is that we've actually launched a couple of new offerings catered to driving value and savings for the consumer. Especially in this time of, I guess, a stressed economy, it's important. And those two examples include bundling of hotels and flights dynamically. So what that allows us to do is offer more savings to the user through a bundled offering. The second is the introduction of online bus tickets. It's not terribly new, but it's something that rounds out our product portfolio, and especially for the more price-conscious consumers, it's a great option. Now, where do we see the space heading? Where are some of the disruptions or the opportunities for innovation? Again, it starts with mobile. I talked about our website, but on the app space, there's a lot of opportunity there to address key pain points throughout the consumer life cycle, whether it's searching for tickets, booking, or post-booking as well during your travel. So I think there's significant opportunity there, and some areas, I'm sure we can talk about this more, but last-minute hotel deals, right? There's a great hotel app called Hotel Tonight in the US, which has gained significant traction. Another area where we see a fair amount of potential is personalization, and it was touched upon earlier, but there's a lot of opportunity to personalize and offer relevant experience based on a customer's search history or the booking history, again, leveraging big data analytics. And this is relevant absolutely both in mobile and desktop. Another area, and I guess this is a bit more specific to travel, is discovery. Our studies show that about 85% of a leisure traveler's time is spent in trying to figure out where do you want to go. I'm sure we can all share that pain. We'll spend hours, weeks figuring out that perfect vacation, and you can go from exploring Goa to South Africa to Bangkok. I mean, it's all over. So it definitely requires a lot of research and investment in time. The opportunity we see there is leveraging your social network a lot more. And we've seen actually some really interesting examples of that. For example, GoGoBot in the US, it's actually one of the fastest growing travel sites. It has over 3.5 million registered users. So that's a promising area where we feel there's a lot of potential in India as well. Another area is actually it's actually a very nascent space, but it's in the area of peer-to-peer shared services. The idea is that any average user can monetize their asset by renting it on a as-needed basis. So a great example of that is Airbnb, where the property owner can rent out their flat, villa, part of their home to travelers around the world. And it's realized significant traction. It has over 300,000 listings and has had over 10 million room nights booked. So those are a few of the, I would say, 3 broad areas. And I would definitely agree with the opportunity for rich media as well in travel. Very relevant, especially for hotels and holidays. The opportunity to surface videos. And of course, that depends a lot more on the adoption of 3G and rollout of 4G. But the need to consume rich content and perhaps even more interesting types of media, virtual reality, to really get a sense of the experience you'll get before you actually decide on your travel plans.
Great. Thank you so much, Anurag. Fascinating. Great. And that was the generation of commerce of digital goods, and before the commerce of physical goods came on. And we now have so many websites that are there, and Snapdeal's been one of the best successes. You guys pivoted and successfully pivoted to what you guys do today. So if you could, Apurva, walk us through this. There's so much happening in the e-commerce space, as we call it. Not to say that travel isn't e-commerce, but where do you see the future? There's a lot of innovation there, but what would your top 3 or 4 things be?
Sure, thank you. Am I audible? Yeah, thank you. So I guess, a lot of the key elements of the future was partly touched upon by my co-panelists here. One of the terms that keep getting thrown up in the digital space now is SOLOMO, right, which stands for social, local, and mobile. And I think that is one of the real fad terminology that a lot of key e-commerce players today are trying to live by. Yep. You would see, in fact, not too long ago, I think last week, there were quite a few articles in the digital media space about how some of the large e-commerce players in India are specifically coming up with apps that are catering to more of the social, local, and mobile trend, right? In fact, one of the things that we think is going to be the next big push for some of the large e-commerce players in India is to be able to actually cater to the forgotten local language audience, which was also partly touched upon by the presentation made just by the student a few minutes ago. We believe that there is tremendous opportunity within the existing space for, let's say, a Hindi or a Bengali website of Snapdeal to just be able to get the 50-year-old plus father who wants to buy something to confidently actually buy that particular product online. I mean, with an English website, a lot of these slightly not so well educated, but people who have been predominantly educated in the vernacular schools and colleges tend to sort of be tentative about what they want to buy, right, and stop themselves. And the moment you sort of bridge that gap, you start seeing very high conversions in smaller towns. So that is one of the trends that we believe will start emerging, and you will start seeing a lot of local language options popping up in some of the key large retailer websites on the top, Hindi, Bengali, and whatever. The other bit, very interestingly, in again keeping in line with the social, local, and mobile theme, is how devices are being used by our consumers today. We believe that while there is popular belief that the application that you deploy on your handset should give you the same experience that you get from your desktop or your website, there's a team in Snapdeal that believes it should be exactly the opposite. It's not necessarily the same device. It's a very different way in which a person consumes content on a handheld versus how he or she makes a purchase decision on a handheld versus how they would make the same decision on a desktop. And therefore, most of the e-commerce players will have to start getting intelligent and creative with how they develop these sites, right? So HTML5, I believe, has been there so far, and most people have just come up with websites which basically replicate their offering on the their web offering on the tablet and on a mobile phone. I think moving forward, you'll start seeing that change quite a bit. So that gives a lot of opportunity for very creative app developers out there who are basically looking at very creative ways in which people can look at content in the online space. Being able to scan a barcode or a QR code, or there's an app called Google Goggles. I'm sure a lot of people have tried it out, but it's not as efficient yet, but you just click a product image and then you'll be able to get an equivalent or a similar product on, let's say, Snapdeal, right, and be able to buy it immediately. Technologies like that, even though they sound far-fetched, you'll be surprised how quickly these can really pop up and become something of a reality for consumers today. And trust me, most of the e-commerce players are working on these back-end technologies. Lastly, again, keeping in mind the social, mobile, local theme, we've seen, or we believe there is a very hands-on approach to this particular theme as well, where one of the large retailers recently launched a very effective program where they essentially handed out an equivalent of prepaid e-franchises, right? So what is an e-franchise? Well, it's as simple as, let's say, I want to have a Snapdeal franchise sitting in Kolhapur.
I'll come back to you, Anurag, because you mentioned something which is fascinating. You did see that or think that peer-to-peer could be an innovation that drives online travel, and I see that successfully in Airbnb globally. But to the rest, classifieds has dabbled with a little peer-to-peer. Now, what's to say that I cannot be the source of jobs coming out of me? Why does it have to be necessarily my company or whichever way it is? And in goods as well. What eBay had done several years back, there seems to be some sort of a resurgence to get back to that marketplace peer-to-peer model. Do you guys also see something like that disrupting your verticals? And if so, yes, how?
I think from a peer-to-peer point of view, I just mentioning this new product we just launched, the recruiter profile product. And here we are actually just saying we'll go not strict to only recruiters. So I can be a recruiter, or you can be a recruiter, and anyone else in the room can be a recruiter, hiring for their teams, right? So, and we're looking at profiles for not just recruiters, but for hiring managers as well. And that too, in a way, is peer-to-peer in some sense, yes, in the job space. You can't really do more than that because job is again competitive. One person is competing with the other person to join in that position. But yes, we don't have to restrict ourselves to just the recruiting community per se. And we want to enable the hiring managers to come face to face with the job seekers and probably hire for their own teams. And that's clearly one area I can see. In Jeevan Sathi space, it's not really peer-to-peer per se, but it's not just the bride and the groom, but it's the family of the bride and the groom. And then, for example, we have the father registering the profile of his son or her daughter. And we have seen that it is not just one individual who is participating in the decision, it's the family. But again, it is not really peer-to-peer in that sense. Property again is something. Property is in a way more peer-to-peer than anything else because the buyer is also the seller and seller is also the buyer. And I could be renting out a space in one part of Delhi, and I could be doing the opposite in the other part of Delhi, just because I own one place and I'm closer to the office in the other place.
Right. Great.
So I think I think the real challenge in the peer-to-peer space. To basically directly answer your question, I think technology is definitely something that will enable this, right? And it's doing that. So if you look at it, the most peer-to-peer or C2C version of this plays out in eBay or in, let's say, a classified like OLX, right? I think it's less of a technology problem and more of a business strategy problem, right? Because the more you go towards a peer-to-peer or a C2C kind of a format, you're talking about the quality of the content or quality of whatever needs to be exchanged, coming into a big question, right? Sure. And I think that's when we start thinking about the maturity of the market, right? Because gradually, so eBay being the first, one of the first by way of Bazi sort of coming into the space, has now come to a stage where the sellers and the buyers are both mature enough to understand what works, right? And therefore, the quality of most of the listings that you would see on eBay that describes what sells and what price they want to sell it at, and at the same time, eBay in itself bringing certain processes and quality checks in, you see a more robust marketplace in place, right? Yeah. So similarly, I believe clearly as the markets mature, as the space matures, we will definitely see a lot more peer-to-peer, peer-to-peer marketplaces coming up, and we would also see a conscious business strategy decision made by some of the larger players to actually have either a separate business that sort of caters to that crowdsourcing market, right? Or basically has a wing of their own business which basically does the same thing.
True. Great. And the other part which has always been in considerable debate but never concluded is localization from a language perspective. We do have, and the best example is you go to print, you go to television, you will see that the largest setups are not necessarily English and Hindi. They are vernacular. But internet and mobile specifically has not necessarily made that leap when it could have perhaps, because most of at least what we represent is not necessarily two-way communication. It's more of, here's what I'm trying to sell, here's the package, here's what I'm trying to sell, here's a good, here's what I'm trying to sell as a job, which could be read in the language that the consumer is comfortable with. Do you see that happening at all, or is there any limitation that you guys recognize as not allowing the entire ecosystem to develop that way?
I could speak from a travel perspective.
Sure.
No, I definitely agree. I think supporting local languages and vernacular is definitely relevant for travel. And it's interesting that we haven't seen it in any of the sites yet. It is something definitely on our minds. I think it's one of those where you have 100 things to chase, but I think to target, and it was one of the points made earlier, to target the tier 2, tier 3 towns, and some of the demographics that you were mentioning, Apurva, it's definitely very relevant and something in our radar.
All right, great. And Vivek, about InfoEdge in general or jobs?
I think if we just look at, we have done some bit of it, but not in India. We've done it in Naukri Gulf, where we have Arabic CV and we have registration forms in Arabic. We haven't really delved deep in India in that sense. I guess as the market evolves, at some point in time, we may have to evaluate that. But I think so far, English continues to be the medium, and it seems to be working fine, even though I'm sure there is a need for vernacular at some point in time. I don't see that today. We're mostly in white collar jobs as much. We are not really in blue collar jobs as that point in terms of numbers. Jeevan Sathi probably is maybe more closer to vernacular than to any other, or maybe jobs or property. Jobs and property, even property could be vernacular, but again, it will be a very different kind of, it is anyway a hyper-local market in some sense. But Jeevan Sathi is something which will probably have much closer to vernacular, because it's not just the bride and the groom, but it's the parents, and that's where the language could be a barrier in terms of adoption. And I'm sure some point in time we'll evaluate that.
Just to add to that, right, I just think rich media in itself, especially for the e-commerce space, has a lot of part to play. So, if I have a video sort of talking about a product, right, and they could speak in English, Hindi, whatever, but the product in itself sort of speaks for itself in the video. So you think of Home Shop 18 videos, right, live telecast, right?
Exactly.
They don't necessarily speak in a local language or in a foreign language, right? But essentially they get the product communication through by just playing with it, right? So I think rich media per se, and with the likes of YouTube sort of letting you host channels of your own and being able to demonstrate products, I think as that piece of technology sort of plays in for e-commerce, while there is pressure to move towards more localization, at the same time there is technology which is also sort of compelling you to rethink how urgently you want to do that, right? And that's where the videos sort of come in.
Absolutely, great, fair point. And let's amongst ourselves move to what we all peg our future on, mobile. In your experience, do you see the user on the mobile phone as different from the one on the web? And if so, how? Anurag, if you want to start.
Sure. So, we have what we have really exposed on mobile, and as I mentioned, it's primarily been on the HTML5 mobile site, has been flight bookings, and more recently hotels. So to be honest, we haven't seen, surprisingly, any key differences versus desktop. So we look at a few parameters. We obviously don't track. We don't track personally identifiable information. But if you look at the booking window, for example, D-5, for example, that means 5 days before you fly. That's actually fairly comparable to what you see on the desktop, which is surprising. I may have expected a slightly, skew towards more urgent bookings, D-1, D-2. But it's a similar histogram when you look at D-1, D-2. So there isn't a significant difference there. Next thing is, if you look at the number of passengers traveling, maybe you could argue that it's more skewed business, and therefore maybe it's one traveler. But we haven't seen a significant difference there either. Perhaps it'll play out more. And like I said, we recently launched hotel booking for hotels online, and that's perhaps an area where you will see some difference, at least anecdotally, and what you see about Hotel Tonight. Maybe there's the typical scenario that we hear of is it's a sales traveler anticipating a day trip, but meetings run over and they need to stay over. So maybe it's a last-minute booking, and it's last minute and just one night. So perhaps you'd see some differences play out there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Apur?
So the moment you ask me about, let's say, a mobile user and how is it different from a desktop user, in essence, it's not. The person is not, right? Like you would go home for the comfort of usage, you would use a desktop or a laptop, right? While you're traveling, you still need to access data. You would use a phone or a tablet PC. So in essence, it's not. But in India, it's a very, very different play, right? So I think a very significant percentage of the users who've never had a desktop are using the mobile phone to go on the internet.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, the contradiction there is those that segment of users are not essentially very comfortable buying straight away, on the internet. They are not the guys who are really, pulling out credit cards and buying, right? Or some of them may not even have the credit cards because of a particular, strata or per capita income bracket. So it's sort of a tough play at this point. It's almost like it's a nightmare for an e-commerce guy to sort of solve this as to what does it really work, or how do you position yourself, or who's that target audience who is going to buy a product of you on the mobile phone, right? Today, just to share a broad number, less than 5% of my total transactions, and when I say less, I mean significantly less, right? I'm just trying to put a number that's that's fair. 5% of my total transaction comes from a handheld, device, tablet, mobile, whereas 15% of my traffic comes from a handheld, right? Which is essentially just goes to show people like browsing, but they probably then walk into a store and say, hey, you know what? Look, it's so cheap on Snapdeal. Why can't you give me that discount? So it's right now doing a very different thing, right? And so I think as technology and the users sort of come to a more common plane, I think you will see a lot of e-commerce players like us starting rationalizing that service or that offering, and then coming up with, let's say, an app or a website which is compatible with your mobile device, and be able to sort of cater to them more effectively. Right now, it's a little lopsided. It's hard to predict, with 90% users being using Android phones, and very few sort of in the iOS and the Windows space.
Yeah, the up one. Bottom line is, don't do it, right? If you see something on the mobile Snapdeal version, buy it.
Please
then
do.
and there. Vivek, any differences you see?
I think what we see is the sessions are shorter, and I guess that's true for most businesses. We also see 99 acres spike on weekends, right? And even Sati tends to use more on mobile than related to the other businesses. What we see is in Naukri, a lot of traffic is emails driven is now getting on the mobile. So there is a difference between mobile and the desktop, just because the share of traffic on mobile is more mailer driven versus that on the desktop. So it could be just because people are accessing more of their personal emails on the go, and since a good chunk of traffic that we get comes from mailers, that tilt is showing in the mobile traffic. But as a consumer, the consumer is the same. It's just whether the mobile or the desktop. But we have sort of now moving to a philosophy where mobile, it's a mobile first for a mobile design rather than just get the same functionality of desktop out on the mobile. Mobile is clearly a large chunk of traffic now. We would cross 20% plus, and we're gaining 1% every month in terms of share of traffic. So it could be a significant chunk. In 2 years, probably we could be touching 40–50% of traffic coming from mobile, and we got to prepare ourselves for that.
Right.
So just want to add there, right? So I think one of the reasons why it is so low, right? It's not just also because of who's buying or who's the person who's basically coming on Snapdeal from mobile. It's also a lot to do with regulations, right? A lot to do with the existing way in which payments are sort of handled, right? And that's where we would like the telecom service providers for us to be able to sort of enable their mobile phones to act like a credit card for that matter. If I can lock in on this person's mobile number and really be able to enable a transaction through him such that he basically has to pay his bill for that transaction to the telecom provider, if there is a scenario like that. And there has been so many talks about it, clearly the mobile wallet and so on and so forth. Things have been thought about, but clearly the on-ground infrastructure is not present. But as those things start coming in, you will definitely see a lot of users taking a chance and having a more of a toe in the water approach, and starting to see an uptake there. But unless that happens, I can't just expect the mobile phone users to be richer over a period of time to start buying from me, right?
Absolutely, great. Yeah, and the one way that I always see it, and it's something that's almost proving itself to be true, is if you look at everyone who was born after 1991, perhaps some of you guys are also there, which is when Indian liberalization opened up, all those are now post their graduation, right? If they did go to graduate school. So they're the ones who are starting to earn. And for them, the world that they lived in is very different from the world that we have come from. We've had to change from an offline world to an online world. There was an era where you used to be called or charged for incoming calls. You guys are a completely different world altogether, but all that era of color televisions, cable television, e-commerce, malls, so on and so forth. And depending on what it is, but here's a number that I always use, there were anywhere between 60 to 100 million people born in India between 91 to 95. And those individuals are now above 18. So that means anytime soon they will start earning, and they've lived in a world that is completely different from the worlds that most of us come from. And they will be the drivers. For them, Google is default. For them, Facebook is default. For them, a mobile phone is default. And the ease with which they will interact with these media and the internet in general will be way, way different than trying to convince my dad to go online, which he did. I don't know why though. Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's open the house for questions.